Kia ora. Can the Māori language be colonised if used with artificial intelligence and other digital technologies? So I'm going to briefly discuss this idea and about if the Māori language can be colonised if used in speech recognition, machine learning, AI and other linguistic technologies. I will make the argument that the Māori language cannot be colonised by making such statements will only hinder Māori Peoples' wellbeing and advancement. As technology is rapidly developing and assisting in our daily lives, there have been some Māori individuals and groups who believe that Te Reo Māori will be colonised if we allow our language to be used in digital technology. The immediate impacts already occurring are that disabled Māori children with speech issues cannot use voice-assisted technologies in Te Reo Māori, as there is a fear that if they do so, the so-called Māori colonisation of the language and ownership will become into question. The language learning app Duolingo that allows people to learn a language from a large selection of international languages is also being criticised for its plans to offer Te Reo Māori. Stating that the Māori language will be colonised makes no sense if you have an understanding of 1. The English definition of the word colonised, 2. An intimate understanding of Māori culture and religion, 3. An understanding of New Zealand's colonial history and its impacts on Māori society. As opposed to using the colonised, the correct term is linguistic imperialism or language imperialism, which is occasionally defined as the transfer of a dominant language to other people. This language transfer comes about because of imperialism. The transfer is considered to be a demonstration of power, traditionally military power, but also, in the modern world, economic power. Aspects of the dominant culture are usually transferred along with the language. In the modern world, linguistic imperialism may also be considered in the context of international development, affecting the standard by which organisations like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, evaluate the trustworthiness and the value of structural adjustment loans. So language ownership, colonisation and imperialism. So 1, the Māori language is not owned by Māori as individuals or as a collective, unless a single word or a phrase has a trademark applied to it. And then there are a number of restrictions that do not impact the majority of Māori or Māori language speakers. 2, Māori language has already suffered language imperialism with a British society who settled here in New Zealand, who decided to impose their language as the dominant language of New Zealand. Furthermore, the government legislated a prolonged campaign against the use of Māori language, including the Native Schools Act, where Māori language could not be spoken. 3, Te Tiriti, and then reinforced in the Y11 claim, recognised Te Reo Māori as a taonga that all New Zealanders can share and use. 4, the Maori Language Act 1987, that was repealed with the Te Ture Mō Te Reo Māori, the Māori Language Act 2016, puts into legislation that Māori language is an official language of New Zealand, thus encouraging anyone to speak Māori language, and further reinforces the fact that Māori language cannot be owned by any individual. It is owned collectively by everybody. Digital apps can't teach tikanga. There's a popular discourse that if you learn to speak Māori from an app, then you will not understand the tikanga and customs of Māori culture. While this may be correct, there's also a Māori cultural belief that one should learn to speak Māori at home. This could be interpreted that in order to learn the tikanga and the customs of your own people, family, history and tribe, you need to learn about them from your unique dialectal differences and various other nuances and unique terms, words and phrases. Regardless of where you learn, unless it is on your own marae and with your own people, learning tikanga and learning a version of Te Reo Māori that has not been linguistically imperialised is status quo of the Māori language, regardless of if it's in a course or online or even in an app. Pre-colonisation, the Māori language was the only language used in New Zealand. It was a rich language full of colloquialisms, personifications and general knowledge of Māori religion and epistemologies. Even Māori language speakers and experts who are fluent in Māori language but learnt away from their marae and learnt Māori language often cannot grasp pre-colonial Māori language. Due to colonisation and legislation such as the Tohunga Suppression Act, the Māori language spoken and learnt from books and education facilities are merely a translated version of English. So learning from an app or online merely provides an easier form of access to a taonga and a birthright that for many of us will increase the number of Māori language speakers and further normalise te reo Māori. Traditional Māori language versus imperialised language. So I'm going to give you some examples of how te reo Māori has been colonised already. In regards to the morning, translations of waking up in the morning commonly state, I woke up in the morning and the birds are chirping. Morning ata, sun, rā, chirping, waiata. A pre-colonial way of making the same statement could be something similar to my wairua returned to the karanga of tānei mahuta's grandchildren, welcoming Tamanui te rā, who was rising above Moana Kiwa, spreading his arms over Tangaroa and Papatua Anuku, under the watchful eye of Rangi Nui. Another example with months and days. The Māori language has had to ignore the nights of the moon, which set the months of the Māori calendar, and each night and month had its own specific Māori names. Post-colonisation has become common to use transliterations of the month names, or more recently, Māori names adapted from the Tūhoi iwi and promoted by the Māori Language Commission. Counting is another example. Pre-colonisation, Māori had their own forms of counting, which was soon disregarded, and the European numerical system, which we all use now, has become normal. The traditional Māori counting system used pairs, meaning that a pre-colonisation number for number 20, ruatako, would be 40 in the English numeric system. The current status of digitised Māori language in foreign-owned conglomerates and accessible to the public. There are several conglomerates already who own large databases of Māori language text, including Microsoft Corporation, Samsung, Moodle and Google. There are many other professional language translators who store Māori language corpuses and strings for automated learning and translations. Freely available on the internet, a large Māori language corpus set up, including the Māori Newspaper collection, the National Library of digitised Māori language magazines and newspapers, Archives New Zealand. There's a number of thesis collections that are in te reo Māori, YouTube collections of recordings of formal orators, Māori language documentaries such as Wakahuia, in addition to the many other repositories that researchers are scraping social media and the web for Māori language usages and creating new corpuses that are shared with other researchers. So in conclusion, the Māori language, like any other language, is not to be owned by any one person or group. Significant harm is caused to Māori peoples who believe otherwise. The internet and academia have a myriad of language corpus in text and audio that's already capable of being used in speech technologies. Stating that the Māori language will be colonised if used by foreign companies is untrue, and the Māori language has already suffered generations of language imperialism to the state that most Māori language speakers now no longer know the difference. The real risks to Māori occur with financial opportunities being lost with technology replacing the need for human translators and teachers, and to Māori communities who may not see the people come back to their marae to learn their language. But it also could have the opposite impacts if planned for now. Technology, by making the Māori language more accessible and more widely used, could create a want to learn Mātauranga Māori and Tikanga Māori skills, which can only be learnt at the marae.